What happens when a quiet, intensely private actor sits down at one of the most opinionated tables on daytime television, and things don't go the way anyone expects? Make sure to subscribe to Final Take Files, and like and comment for more talk show coverage. The show opens like it always does. Music, applause, the hosts walking out smiling and waving to the audience. Everything feels routine, familiar. They settle into their seats, exchanging quick greetings before one of them turns to the camera. "All right, we have a really interesting guest today," she says with a smile. "He's one of the most talked about actors of our time, known for completely transforming into his roles." Another host jumps in with a light laugh. "And also known for being a little unpredictable." The audience chuckles, already sensing something different. "Please welcome Joaquin Phoenix." Applause rises as he walks out. He gives a small wave, not overly expressive, and takes his seat. He nods politely. "Thanks for being here," one host says. "Thanks for having me," he replies calmly. There's a brief pause, not awkward yet, just the beginning of the conversation. "So, you don't do a lot of shows like this," another host says. "Do you enjoy this part of the process?" Joaquin shifts slightly. "Not particularly," he says honestly. The audience laughs in surprise. "I understand it's part of it," he adds, "but it's not where I'm most comfortable." "Well, we appreciate you being here anyway," she says quickly. "Yeah," he nods. They move on. "Let's talk about your latest project," a host says, brightening. "People are calling it one of your most intense performances." "I just try to do the work honestly," he replies. "But the role is heavy," another host presses. "Did it affect you personally?" He pauses. "I think people exaggerate that stuff," he says. "You're not living in another reality all the time." "But you do go deep into characters," she insists. "I try to understand them," he says. "That's it." The tone is still polite, but there's a slight stiffness now. One host leans forward. "It feels like you disappear into roles. Like we don't see you anymore." "That's kind of the point," he replies. A few laughs, but softer this time. "Okay, but who are you off camera?" another host asks. "What do you do to relax?" Joaquin pauses longer. "I like being at home," he says. "Spending time with family." "That's it?" she asks, half joking. He gives a small smile. "That's a lot." One host nods. "That sounds grounding." "Yeah," he says quietly. There's a moment where the conversation could shift, but it doesn't. Instead, one host leans in again, tone sharper. "You've also been very vocal about social issues," she says. "Some people feel celebrities can come off as preachy. Do you think about that?" The audience reacts immediately. Some murmurs, a few claps. Joaquin's expression changes slightly. "I don't think it's preaching," he says. "It's just speaking about what matters to you." "But do you think there's a line?" she asks. "Because people feel talked at sometimes." He takes a breath. People can choose to listen or not. Another host steps in. "Do you worry about how it comes across?" "If you worry too much about that," Joaquin says, "you end up not saying anything real." A small wave of applause breaks out. The tension is building now. The first host leans back slightly. "But there's also responsibility when you have a platform." "Sure," he says. "So where's the line?" He pauses again. "I don't think there's a clear line," he says. "You just try to be honest." The room feels quieter. Another host tries to pivot. "Let's go back to the film. There's a scene everyone's talking about." But she's cut off. "No, because I think this matters," the first host says. "A lot of viewers feel like celebrities tell them how to think." Joaquin leans back slightly now, more guarded. "I'm not telling anyone how to live," he says. "I'm not saying you are," she replies, "but that's how it feels." A beat passes. "Well, I can't control how everyone feels," he says. Some applause, some murmurs. Another host tries to smooth things over. "I think it's about balance, using your voice without alienating people." Joaquin nods, but doesn't respond right away. There's a silence now that lingers just a little too long. The camera briefly cuts to the audience, people leaning forward, sensing the shift. Joaquin finally speaks. "I think people can decide for themselves," he says. A few claps. But the first host isn't letting it go. Or maybe people are just tired of being told what's right and wrong. That lands heavier than anything before. Joaquin looks at her, his expression more serious now. And in that moment, you can feel it clearly. This conversation isn't just tense anymore. It's about to turn into something much bigger. The room holds that tension for a second longer than usual. It's the kind of silence that doesn't happen often on live TV, the kind where everyone knows something just shifted. Joaquin looks at the host, then briefly down at the table, then back up again. He doesn't rush to fill the silence. "Well," he says slowly, "I don't think anyone likes being told what to think." The host nods quickly, like she's been waiting for that. Exactly. So when celebrities speak out strongly, it can feel like that's what's happening. He tilts his head slightly. Or it can just be someone sharing their perspective. Another host jumps in, trying to soften the tone. "I think there's just a difference between sharing and pushing." Joaquin glances toward her. "Yeah," he says, "but who decides when it becomes pushing?" The audience reacts again, some clapping, some murmurs. The first host leans forward, more engaged now. The audience decides. And clearly, a lot of people feel that way. He nods once. "That's fine. But does that make you rethink how you speak about certain issues?" she presses. There's a pause. Joaquin exhales slightly. "No," he says. The directness lands immediately. A few people in the audience let out quiet oohs. "No," she repeats, eyebrows raised. "No," he says again, calm but firmer. "Because I'm not speaking for everyone. I'm just speaking for myself." Another host quickly tries to redirect. "Let's talk about how audiences have responded to your film, because it's been very divided." But again, the first host cuts in. "But that's exactly the point," she says. "When you have influence, whether you like it or not, people listen. So it's not just for yourself." Joaquin leans back slightly, his posture more closed now. "I think people give too much weight to that," he says. "I don't think someone watches a movie or an interview and suddenly changes their entire belief system." "You'd be surprised," she replies. "I would," he says, a hint of dryness in his tone. The audience reacts, some laughter, but it's mixed with tension. Another host tries again to balance things out. "I think what she's getting at is that there are people who look up to you, who take what you say seriously." Joaquin nods. "Sure. And I take that seriously. But that doesn't mean I stop being honest." There's a small round of applause. The first host shakes her head slightly. But honesty without awareness can come off as dismissive. That line shifts the energy again. Joaquin's expression tightens, just a little more than before. "Dismissive of what?" he asks. "Of other perspectives," she says. "Of people who don't agree with you." He pauses, then answers carefully. "I'm not dismissing anyone. I just don't agree with everyone." "But when you speak publicly," she says, "it's not a private conversation anymore." "And I'm aware of that," he replies. "But I'm still allowed to have a point of view." The audience claps again, this time louder, more divided. One host raises her hand slightly, trying to mediate. Okay, let's just bring this down a notch." But it doesn't quite come down. The first host continues, not aggressively, but firmly. "No one's saying you're not allowed. We're just saying there's an impact." Joaquin nods slowly. "Everything has an impact. So then why not be more careful?" she asks. There's another pause. Joaquin looks at her steadily now. "Because careful can sometimes mean not saying anything real," he says. That line hits. The audience reacts, some applause, some audible disagreement. One person in the crowd even says, "That's true," loud enough to be picked up faintly. The first host smiles, but it's tighter now. Or it can mean being respectful. "I am being respectful," Joaquin replies. "Are you?" she asks, tilting her head slightly. That question hangs in the air. There's a noticeable shift in Joaquin's body language. He sits up a bit straighter, his tone still controlled, but more serious. "Yeah," he says. "I am." Another host quickly steps in. "I think this is just a passionate conversation." But Joaquin continues, not raising his voice, just not letting it go. "I haven't disrespected anyone," he says. "No one said you did," the first host responds, though her tone suggests she's still challenging him. "It kind of feels like that's what you're implying," he says. The audience reacts again, this time louder. The tension is no longer subtle. It's right there on the surface. The host exhales slightly, then leans back. "I'm asking questions that a lot of viewers have." "And I'm answering them," Joaquin replies. Another pause. One of the other hosts, clearly trying to reset things, smiles toward Joaquin. "Let's shift gears for a second. There's a lighter side to this too. Your co-stars have said you're actually very funny on set." Joaquin gives a small smile, but it fades quickly. "I don't know about that," he says. The attempt at humor doesn't quite land. The room is still too tense. The first host isn't done. "But even on set," she says, "people say you stay very intense, very in character. Some have even said it can be difficult." There's a subtle reaction from the audience again. Joaquin looks at her, clearly recognizing where this is going. "I think every set is different," he says. "People work in different ways." "So you don't think it ever creates a negative environment?" she asks. "I try not to," he says. "But does it?" she presses. There's a longer pause this time. Joaquin looks down briefly, then back up. "I think, sometimes people project things onto situations," he says. The host raises an eyebrow. "Project?" "Yeah," he says. "They interpret things in a certain way that may not be accurate." "So when people say it's difficult," she says, "you think that's not true?" "I think it's their experience," he replies. "But it's not the whole picture." The audience murmurs again. Another host jumps in, more gently. "Have you ever had a moment where you thought, maybe I should approach this differently?" Joaquin considers that. "Yeah," he says. "I mean, I'm always learning." That's the first moment of softening. The audience responds positively, some clapping, a few relieved laughs. But the first host doesn't fully let it go. "So then why push back so hard now?" she asks. And that question lands differently. Joaquin looks at her, his expression now more guarded than at any point so far. "I'm not pushing back," he says slowly. "I'm responding." The room goes quiet again. Because now, it's clear. This isn't just a discussion anymore. It's becoming a standoff. And you can feel that whatever happens next, it's going to be hard to pull this conversation back. The silence after that line lingers just a little too long for live TV. One of the hosts lets out a small breath and tries to smile it off. "Okay. I think we're all just having a very real conversation right now." A few people in the audience laugh, but it's nervous more than amused. Joaquin nods slightly, but he doesn't add anything. Another host jumps in quickly, clearly trying to regain control of the segment. "Let's take it back to the work for a second, because at the end of the day, that's why you're here. The film, people are talking about how raw it feels." Joaquin gives a short nod. "Yeah." "What drew you to that role?" she asks. He pauses. "I thought the character was honest," he says. "Complicated, but honest." "Do you relate to him at all?" she asks. "A little," he admits. "In some ways." That's the first moment in a while where the tone softens just slightly. But it doesn't last long. The first host leans back in, not letting the earlier tension fully drop. "It's interesting you keep using the word honest," she says. "Because I think that's what we've been circling around this whole time." Joaquin glances at her, already sensing where it's going. "I mean," she continues, "there's your honesty, and then there's how it lands with people." He exhales quietly. "Yeah." "So when people feel alienated," she says, "does that matter to you?" There's a pause. "It matters," he says carefully. "But it doesn't mean I change what I believe." The audience reacts again, split between applause and murmurs. Another host raises her hand slightly. "Okay, but can both things exist? You keep your beliefs, but also adjust how you communicate them. Joaquin leans back, thinking. Maybe, he says. But I think people can tell when something's filtered. The first host nods, but her expression stays firm. Or they can feel when they're being dismissed. That word again, dismissed. Joaquin's expression tightens. I'm not dismissing anyone, he says, a little more firmly than before. I didn't say you were intentionally, she replies, but impact matters more than intent sometimes. The audience gives a louder, ma'am, this time. A few claps follow. Joaquin looks out briefly toward the audience, then back at the table. I think people are stronger than that, he says. I don't think they need me to soften everything. One audience member claps loudly. Others follow, but not everyone. Now the table feels divided, and so does the room. Another host tries again to bring balance. I think what we're seeing is two different views of responsibility. And honestly, both exist. She turns to Joaquin. Do you ever feel misunderstood in these moments? That question lands differently. Joaquin pauses longer this time. Yeah, he says quietly. The tone shifts just a bit, less sharp, more real. In what way? She asks gently. He hesitates, then answers. I think, sometimes people decide what you mean before you've even finished saying it. There's a small ripple through the audience, some agreement, some silence. The first host crosses her arms slightly. Or maybe they're reacting to a pattern. That pulls it right back. Joaquin looks at her again, and this time there's a noticeable change. He's still calm, but there's frustration under it now. What pattern? He asks. The room goes very still. She doesn't answer right away, which somehow makes it heavier. I think, she says slowly, there's a perception that you come across as a little detached. Like you don't really engage with opposing views. A few audience members murmur in agreement. Others shake their heads. Joaquin lets out a short breath, almost like a quiet laugh, but there's no humor in it. I'm sitting here engaging right now, he says. That line hits immediately, some applause, some okay, from the audience. The host nods, but doesn't fully concede. You are. But it feels like you're pushing back on every point. Because you keep making the same point, he replies. That gets a louder reaction. Some gasps, a few claps. One of the other hosts quickly jumps in. Okay, all right, let's just. But now it's harder to stop. The first host leans forward again. No, I'm clarifying for viewers. And I'm answering, Joaquin says, cutting in slightly. That overlap, both voices at once, changes the energy completely. The audience reacts louder now. You can hear it. This is no longer just tense, it's uncomfortable. There's a beat where neither of them speaks. Then Joaquin shakes his head slightly and looks down at the table. Another host tries one more time to redirect. Maybe we just take a breath here. This is live. These conversations happen. But Joaquin isn't looking at them anymore. He's looking off to the side for a second, then back at the table. And when he finally speaks again, his voice is still calm, but different. Yeah. I don't know if this is really a conversation anymore. That line lands heavier than anything before it. The audience goes quiet. The hosts glance at each other. Because now, for the first time, it feels like something might actually break. And no one at the table seems completely sure how to stop it. That line just hangs there. One of the hosts quickly leans in, forcing a smile. Of course it is. We're just having a discussion. But Joaquin shakes his head slightly, already pulling back. No. I think I'm good, he says. There's an immediate reaction from the audience. Gasps, confused murmurs. Another host reaches out verbally, trying to stop it. Wait, Joaquin, we didn't mean. But he's already standing. It's okay, he says calmly. I just don't want to keep doing this. The room feels frozen as he gives a small nod, then walks off the set. Some audience members clap awkwardly, others sit in stunned silence. The hosts sit there for a second, visibly caught off guard. Well, that happened, one of them says, trying to recover. Another host shakes her head. I think things just got a little too heated. They quickly cut to commercial, but the moment is already out there. By the time the show ends, clips are everywhere. Social media lights up. Some people defend Joaquin, saying he was being pushed too hard. Others side with the hosts, saying he overreacted. Hashtags start trending, debates break out, and everyone seems to have an opinion. Reports later say Joaquin left the building immediately, skipping any backstage follow-ups. The show doesn't address it again that day, but the moment keeps spreading online. And just like that, it becomes one of those interviews people keep replaying, trying to figure out exactly where it went wrong. Now we want to hear from you. Was Joaquin justified in walking out, or should he have stayed and handled it differently? Share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to Final Take Files for more real talk show stories.